Merry Christmas. While Andy and I are waiting to see what Santa left us each under the tree, college basketball teams the country over are hoping for special gifts from the big guy to put them in position to win the 2024 national championship.
You are Locked On College Basketball, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hey there, what's up? Merry Christmas. Welcome into the Locked On College Basketball Podcast, the only daily national college hoop show out there. Yes, we're even coming to you on Christmas Day. For those of you watching, you can see how festive Andy and I both look in our garb and paraphernalia. We want to especially welcome in you. Yes, I did just use both those words. Welcome in you everydayers. We're so glad you're here to get your college basketball content every day. If you want to be a bigger part of the community, talk college basketball with us all the time, come join the Locked On College Basketball Discord. The link for that is in the show notes. A couple things for you as we get into today's show. Since it's Christmas Day, Locked On said, hey, look, no ads at all. Just plow through this thing. So a special little gift from us to you. You don't have to hit the 15 seconds forward button ever on this one. Also, if you weren't with us last week, our humble little show here has been shortlisted for the Sports Podcast Awards in the Best Basketball Podcast category, a special, super cool honor. And what's interesting is we're the only college basketball show on there. Everything else is NBA. So if you would hop in there and vote for us, we'd be honored if you do that. The voting system is super easy. It takes less than a minute. Go in and do that. Also of note, there are literally no games today, no games tomorrow, and just 2 games on Wednesday. So a lot of just kind of fun, big picture stuff between now and then later in the week, we'll get back into actual more kind of basketball content. But Andy, here's where we're headed today. I'm super excited about this topic. We were already planning on doing it, and then GU Big Rig on Discord was like, hey, what about this topic? And it was exactly what we're doing. So what Andy and I are looking at today is we've each picked 3 teams that we think need a special gift out of Santa's bag this year that would kind of help complete them and move them in the direction of winning the national championship. And so we're super excited to share these with you and would love to hear if you've got ideas about it as well. That said, we're going to dive into my first team, and that is the UConn Huskies. And what is it that Santa's going to bring UConn? Andy, new feet for Donovan Clingan. Unfortunately, Mr. Clingan is on the shelf for 3 or 4 weeks with a right foot injury. It's a tendon issue. This is the second time this year he's had that. You might recall that in preseason, Donovan Clingan had a foot issue that kept him out about a month. It was the same foot. However, Coach Hurley has said that it is a non-related issue. But Andy, here's the thing for me. If the Huskies are to have any hope of repeating, despite what Samson Johnson did Saturday, which was phenomenal, by the way, they've got to have Donovan Clingan healthy. Andy, what do you think about my first present?
Yeah, Clingan's health is massive. It's an incredibly huge storyline for UConn, for the Big East, for college basketball, as UConn, of course, looks to repeat as national champions. And I know that Clingan's not their leading scorer. He's not quite as singularly impactful as maybe like an Adama Sanogo was last year. Right. He's their 4th leading scorer. He's behind Newton, Cam Spencer, Alex Karaban, but when they need him to dominate, he can dominate. And I'm not 100% sold that they get by Gonzaga without Donovan Clingan. And they shot really well against Gonzaga, but that was a 13-point game, and Clingan had 21. Yeah. And he did most of his damage in the first half, got some of Gonzaga's bigs in foul trouble, got into their depth a little bit. Like, those are the kind of impacts that he has. Beyond that, I think Gonzaga's 4 combined bigs shot like 27% from the field, and that is in part because of Clingan's impact on the defensive end of the floor. So he's more impactful than the stats are necessarily going to show you, just because of his defensive presence, limits guards being able to drive to the basket, forces teams to settle for outside shots. Like, he's an incredibly impactful player, whether he's putting up numbers or not. And for UConn, yes, Samson Johnson looked great against St. John's. He had 16 points in that one. Really, really good performance. Former top 50 prospect, like really talented kid to be able to bring in and have in that role. But the depth beyond that is pretty weak for UConn. You know, Stephon Castle hasn't really been that guy for the Huskies yet, obviously coming off his own injury as well. And this is a UConn team that has the pieces to be a national champion unquestionably. They're one of the 2 or 3 most talented rosters in the country when they're at full health, but they're not going to be at full health until late January. And this is going to be a tough pill for UConn to swallow as they get into Big East. We already saw they're very close to starting the season 0-2 in conference play. They managed to sneak by St. John's, but was not able to do the same against Seton Hall, 15-point loss there. So going to be really interesting to see what UConn's able to do. But certainly if Santa was able to give Clingan some new feet, that would probably put the national championship conversation would certainly have to go through stores once again.
And there are a couple pieces of good news with this, Andy. You know, we often think about like, hey, what can a team benefit from an injury? Mm-hmm. Well, Samson Johnson is going to get extended minutes. They're going to have to figure out how to operate with him. Building that level of depth can't be anything but good other than if you take some losses. However, speaking of taking losses, you look ahead to UConn's schedule over the next month or so. They played DePaul, Butler, Butler and Xavier on the road. So that's tough. Georgetown at home, Creighton at home. That's obviously tough. And then Villanova on the road. And if it pushes out to a little bit over a month, they got Xavier at home on January 28th. So Andy, it's not exactly a murderer's row of games. They don't have to play Providence in that stretch. They don't have to play Marquette in that stretch. And their only game against Creighton is at home. They do have Villanova away. So, you know, I think they catch a little bit of a schedule break. And the other thing is that maybe this is an opportunity to try out some other new kinds of lineups and things that Coach Hurley wanted to do. So not all bad. But again, bottom line, like you have said, like I said earlier, if UConn's going to repeat, Donovan Clingan has to be fully healthy. Andy, who is your first present for out of Santa's big bag?
Well, speaking of teams that need some help in the front court and that have needed to make adjustments to their lineup because they haven't had said help in the front court, we're going over to Lexington, Kentucky, where Santa needs to figure out if I don't know what kind of pull he's got with the NCAA, but if he has any authority over that body, he needs to figure out a way to get Zvonomir Ivisic active, eligible, able to step on the floor for the Kentucky Wildcats. That is what I am sure Kentucky is desperately looking for right now because Aaron Bradshaw is back. They got him healthy. He has been solid, 8.5 points, 5 boards, and a little over a block a game. He's only playing 21 minutes. He's only played 4 games, so it's very new for him. Again, Onyenso is back as well, so they kind of got their front court more or less healthy. Haven't had to keep playing Adutiero at the 4. Haven't had to keep playing Trey Mitchell at the 5, but a big anchor for this Kentucky team was the expectation that they would be able to play 7-foot Croatian center Zvonomir Ivisic, and they have not been able to do so. And the story is a little bit hard to follow. He was he was eligible. He got to campus. He enrolled in classes. There was not really any issues with that. The NCAA has been looking into whether he got paid impermissibly when he played professionally last season. For some reason, that process seems to be taking an extremely long time. He has not been able to play yet. He's had some mental health struggles as well. Calipari talked about the amount of weight that Ivisic has lost. He's homesick. He's sad he's not able to play. All these things that really aren't surprising, but are sad. And you kind of feel for the kid. You feel, for the program to an extent, but really just for this young man to travel across the country to get the opportunity to play college basketball. And he's not getting that opportunity and presumably doesn't know exactly why. I don't know, all the communication that has happened with him and his family, but he's kind of just stuck in limbo right now. And certainly for him, for his mental health and happiness, I want to see him get on the floor and start playing for Kentucky. And for Kentucky, this is a team that is very good offensively, but they're only okay defensively, 46th in the country right now in adjusted defensive efficiency at KenPom. The opposing teams are shooting about 50% on 2-pointers, which is in the bottom 200 in terms of opposing field goal percentage there. So having somebody with Ivisic's size, certainly Bradshaw is going to help now that he's back, but 100%. Having somebody like Ivisic who reportedly can space the floor as well, kind of put a little bit more strain on SEC defenses, would just be a huge benefit for Calipari's team. I mean, they're already getting incredible production from their 3-point guards, Reed Shepard, Rob Dillingham, and DJ Wagner. Again, Bradshaw back is helpful. Justin Edwards has not looked like the guy he was expected to be, but there's a decent chance that he's going to find his way, at least to some extent, in conference play. Of course, Antonio Reeves, especially after that Louisville game, he just looked absolutely incredible. So this is a really talented team. This is a deeper team than people expected them to be with the way that some of those backup freshmen are playing. But having Ivisic would make this team instantly, in my mind, if he's anywhere close to the player he was billed as being, this makes this team a national championship contender immediately if he can come in and contribute. But the longer this gets dragged out, the less likely that is, and it's an unfortunate story for everybody involved.
Yeah, because we so often look, and I know he is a much more experienced player than like a traditional college
Mhm.
freshman, but I mean, so often, like if an incoming freshman is hurt preseason or because of other issues isn't able to be part of the team, there's always this like, yeah, they just kind of get pushed back and aren't really able to mix in
Yeah.
as the season gets further. So for Kentucky, they've only got one more kind of tune up before SEC play. That's Illinois
Mhm.
State this coming Friday. But then
Yeah.
they're at Florida Saturday, January 6th, Andy. So, I mean, it's right into SEC play. Going to be interesting. Now, I think the most important thing to go back to is you asked about how much pull Santa has with the NCAA. Yeah, my man's got this little list and he says, "Oh, I'm sorry, NCAA. Did you think you were going to be on the nice list? No, sirree, Bob. You're over here on the naughty list and you ain't getting no presents but coal in your stockings." So, Andy, yeah, that's what pull my big man Santa Claus has.
Well, Santa's now headed over the Big 12 country, and we're going to figure out what he's bringing those Jayhawks in Lawrence, Kansas, as well as the Baylor Bears over in Waco. And Isaac, let's start with Baylor.
Yeah.
And this may seem odd because this person is kind of at odds with Santa Claus, but I think Baylor needs the Grinch
Yes.
because
Yes.
Baylor, what they realistically need from a basketball perspective is they need a good on-ball perimeter defensive player. They're holding teams to a solid three. I think teams are shooting only like 31% against them from three. So it's not like they're getting killed from
30,
beyond the arc.
under that, yeah.
They have the interior post defender in Yves Missy, excuse me. He's been an absolute revelation for the Bears, 2.3 blocks per game, only playing 20 minutes a night. He's been incredible. But overall, Baylor's not a good defensive team. And this was the issue with them last year. It's been the issue under Scott Drew a handful of times. He's an incredible offensive coach. The team is always great offensively and defensively. When they're great, they win national championships like they did a couple of years ago. But too often they are not great. And I think looking at this team from the eye test, from the numbers, they just don't have that like killer instinct perimeter defender, just, some hard-nosed guy who can get in people's faces and prevent other Big 12 guards from going off against them. They're averaging 7.5 steals per game. That's 120th in the country. So they need somebody to go out there and take the ball away. That's why they need the Grinch. They need him to go out there, be mean, be a little nasty, go get that basketball away from people and kind of build up this team's defense because they're giving up too many points. Tyson Walker gashed them when they played Michigan State. Jared McCain absolutely obliterated them. The pick and roll defense is not there. This is a team that frankly, having watched those Michigan State and Duke games, while both of those losses are defensible in a vacuum, the first half against Michigan State was pretty indefensible in terms of how poorly they played. And the defense just doesn't look like a national championship team. Quite honestly, I don't know that Baylor, unless the defense improves somewhat dramatically, is a national championship contender. I don't remember the figure off the top of my head, Isaac. I know you and I talked about it quite a bit last year. I don't think a team has won the national championship ranked outside the top. I know it's outside the top 40 at KenPom. I think it's like outside the top 35. And again, Baylor is 70th. So there's a lot of changes that need to be made on the defensive end of the ball for this Baylor team to be a national championship contender.
Hey, at least they're in the top 100 this year, unlike last year, Andy. Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. The 3 years preceding last year, their defense was top 25 at KenPom each of those 3 years, including the national championship season where they were, really high. I mean, so it's wild that then last year they fell outside the top 100. As you said, this year they're top 70. Andy, I think my biggest question I have for you is which of the three Grinches is it that Scott Drew needs? Is it the original? Is it that dumb Jim Carrey one? Or is it the Benedict Cumberbatch one? Get this.
I'd say original, throwing it all the way back, old school 50s style defender from the Grinch.
100%. Now you got to answer the most important question, Andy. Of the two full-length movies, which is the better of the two?
I have a soft spot for the Grinch, the Jim Carrey version of the Grinch. I don't know if it's necessarily better than the other one, but that is the one that I am more likely to watch because I've been watching it pretty much every year since I was a kid.
All right, fine. You're wrong, but that's fine.
I'll accept that.
Andy, let's stay in the Big 12 and move over to Lawrence, Kansas. And something that I think Santa needs to bring to Bill Self's club is a shooting guard to step up and say, I'm your man. Let's go with this thing. Because the other four starters, it's so locked in. Kevin McCullough, Check. This dude is averaging 20 points a game, Andy. I think a lot of folks might not realize Hunter Dickinson is not the leading scorer on this team right now. It's Kevin McCullough. Although Dickinson is having a year too. I think he's averaging 18 and 12 right now. So the center position, check. KJ Adams, check. DeJuan Harris, check. Holding it down like he always does at the 1. And the thing for Kansas is that they don't need a ton of depth behind these starters. Right now, they're 354th in the nation in bench usage. Only Michigan is lower in terms of Power 6 schools. We talked about it a lot last year that they were 361st in the nation in bench usage, 301st in their national championship year. So they don't need a ton of that. And in fact, they don't even need a ton of three-point shooting right now. They're only getting 26.7% of their points from the three-point line. So they don't need a ton of any of that, but they need more of it, because getting more from beyond 3 is going to help space things out for Hunter Dickinson, for Kevin McCullough to operate inside. But if they're going to be more complete, if they're going to be a national champion contender, somebody has to rise up and say, I'm your dude to be the 2 guard. Now, I know that a lot of people are probably saying, well, obviously it's Elmarko Jackson. He has started every game this season for the Jayhawks. True and fair, and I think it needs to be him. But Elmarko Jackson is shooting 25% from 3, Andy. That is not going to cut it for a championship level team in terms of their starting shooting guard. So is it going to be Elmarko Jackson? Is it going to be Johnny Furphy or Nick Timberlake and all the accolades he brings from what he's done in his college career? None of these guys have by themselves lived up to what the Jayhawks need to be elite. Like right now, until they get that figured out, not only do I not think that they're going to get to national championship status, I'm worried about what the Big 12 is going to look like. They're not going to fall off, but I don't know that as things stand right now with their shooting guard struggles that they can win the Big 12. Is that crazy?
No, I don't think it's crazy. For me, what I'm really curious about with Kansas is what the plan was going into the season. Whether the plan, my guess is the plan was not to start Elmarko Jackson. I think a lot of people had him coming off the bench. I think just, he was obviously had high accolades coming to Kansas. Most freshmen coming to Kansas did. Like that's not uncommon. But I think the plan was either Timberlake or, of course, it could have been Arterio Morris, who is no longer with the program. Frankly, if Bill Self was expecting, if the season was hinging on Arterio Morris being like a breakout candidate for the team, that's a mistake. Obviously, the hindsight is 2020 with regards to what happened after they chose to sign Arterio Morris. But there was indications that there could have been some legal stuff beforehand. He'd already been arrested and had legal issues prior to even his time at Texas. But even beyond that, like Morris, if you just look at it from a basketball perspective, there was no guarantee that he was going to explode as a sophomore either. He was only adequate as a freshman at Texas. So I don't know if he was the plan. I don't know if Nick Timberlake was expected to be. I'm guessing they expected more from him than what they have got, because
we did, right?
Okay. We certainly did. I thought, coming over from Towson, I thought he was going to start and be a potential double-digit scorer for them. And they don't need him to be that, but he hasn't been close to that. Frankly, he has not been that guy. And I think Elmarko Jackson is doing about as well as a freshman in this class in this role would be expected to do, which is to say that they needed somebody else and they don't have that person. And maybe Jackson will step up. Maybe Timberlake will find that outside shooting. Maybe Furphy will step up. I don't think it's crazy to think he could have a strong Big 12 play, but unless one of those guys really pops, I agree with you that this is a pretty big hole for Kansas and the kind of hole that could prevent them from being a national champion.
Yeah, I like the Furphy take, Andy, there. He's shooting the best from 3 out of all these guys. He's 38.7%, but the problem is he's only taken 2.8 attempts per game, but none of the other dudes are taking more. Elmarko Jackson, 2 attempts. Timberlake, 2.8, so right on with Furphy. So this is a big hole. However, we often see, a lot of times we see freshmen maybe start hot and then kind of tank. I wouldn't be surprised, as you kind of alluded to there, if Jackson figures it out a little more and a little more and a little more. And like we look up in late February and it's like, oh, Elmarko Jackson's figuring this thing out. If he does, Kansas could be right back where they want to be.
Well, Isaac, let's say Santa's moving all the way out to the West Coast, Spokane, Washington, helping out Mark Few and the Gonzaga Bulldogs. And this team, they need some magic touch. And in particular, they need some magic touch from the three-point land because, wow, this is not a good three-point shooting team. And the roster construction, the big issue for them was before the season started, like just 2 days before their first game, Steele Venters, transfer from Eastern Washington, Big Sky Player of the Year, 43% three-point shooter, tore his ACL. And he is out for the entire year for Gonzaga. That was a huge blow for them, not just in terms of losing a player who's expected to start at the three and losing some depth at a key position of need, which has been an issue for him throughout the year, but he was their three-point shooter. I mean, this team lost Julian Strother to the NBA. They lost Rasir Bolton to graduation. They lost Malachi Smith to the G League where he's playing now. Like, they lost almost all of their three-point shooting from last year's roster. Steele Venters was going to be asked to play a pretty significant role as their floor spacer, as their three-point shooter. Now, without him in the mix, you just don't have that outside shooting. You have great front court players. Graham Ike has looked every bit the player that the Gonzaga hoped he would be, that Wyoming hoped he would be before he suffered that injury and missed all of last season. Anton Watson is having the best season of his career. Ben Gregg and Braden Huff are probably the best backup big man tandem in the country. These two guys are absolutely phenomenal, both shooting over 42% from three. Gonzaga has the front court depth to be a national championship contender. They have the talent in the backcourt in the way that Nolan Hickman's been inconsistent, but when he's playing well, he's very good. Ryan Nembhard is a phenomenal point guard and led Creighton to Elite Eight last year, but they do not have the shooting. And Ryan Nembhard in particular is a big part of that. He was a 35.5% shooter at Creighton last year. This year, on 3 attempts per game, Nembhard is shooting 17% from three, less than half what he shot last year. And he has taken open looks. He is not forcing bad shots. He just cannot hit the inside of the rim. I don't know what it is, whether it's the yips, whether it's just a really, really prolonged shooting slump, but he has not been that guy. Dusty Stromer asked to step into a starting role as a true freshman because of the injury to Steele Venters. Stromer has been better than advertised in every single way as a defensive player, as an energy guy, even as an offensive player, but he's not a three-point shooter. He's shooting 32%, which is okay on about 4 attempts
it's
per
better
game.
than 17%.
Better than 17%, that's for sure. Hickman's at 34%, a little below his career mark. The bigs are shooting okay, but they're not shooting a huge volume. Watson's having the best shooting season of his career, but it's on like 2 attempts per game. This team cannot space the floor the second half of games, particularly because of fatigue, because they don't have a backup point guard, which Santa could also bring them if they really needed it, especially with Luka Krajinovic suffering an injury as well. He's going to be out until late January as a backup freshman guard for them. This is a team that has the pieces, but with injuries and with ineffectiveness from some of the backcourt players, they have not looked like a championship team. They have not looked like themselves. And until they find a way to start knocking down those outside shots, this is a team that could be in trouble this year.
Andy, let's move to the Big Ten to wrap up today's show. We've got one more team to give a little present to from our guy, Santa. And this is the Purdue Boilermakers. And Andy, I'm a big SNL fan. My wife and I watch it every week when it's on. And speaking of SNL, a show that was birthed out of that is one of the biggest shows of the past couple years, and that is Ted Lasso. If you've not seen it, I don't know what rock you've been hiding under, but you need to go watch it on Apple Plus. Ted Lasso is a show that features Jason Sudeikis as an American football coach who goes to Britain to coach a soccer team, a sport about which he knows nothing. However, he knows coaching, and one of the things he tells his guys, a couple of them, is that they need to be a goldfish. Why? Because goldfish have a 10-second memory. And so, it's that short-term mentality, like next play kind of thing that we're talking about. Like you miss a shot, you go right back to it. And so what Santa needs to bring to the Purdue Boilermakers is a goldfish mentality, meaning they got to take that loss to FDU last year, bury it in the deepest chasms that they could. Mariana Trench that thing, Andy. Get it on out of here, because they have to move past that and just know that they are moving forward this year doing everything like they need to do, like Virginia before them did, and ended up winning the national championship. That's what Purdue needs to do. Obviously, they still have Zach Edey, who is just a dude and doing everything you expect right now, barring some kind of miracle. He will be a repeat national player of the year. The thing that gives me the most hope and confidence for Santa giving this goldfish mentality is that the supporting cast, in particular Braden Smith, is doing so much more. And Andy, one thing I think where they do need to remember it a little bit, the FDU thing, is I don't want them to forget the feelings. I don't want them to forget how it felt, or the pit in their stomach of the reality of what just happened, the history of that. I want that to spur them on, but I want the pressure of it to be gone. Just go out there and ball game after game after game. They're going to be a 1 seed again. Just go out and do the work. Like the Big Ten right now is not showing a ton of resistance for Purdue. And so I think they have everything they need in front of them to go out, just kind of do what they're supposed to do in Big Ten play, and then go dominate the NCAA tournament. So Purdue Boilermakers, be goldfish.
I love this one, Isaac, because I love the Ted Lasso reference because I watched Ted Lasso and it's a phenomenal show. But I think also this is a coaching thing to an extent. Like we can have a longer conversation sometime about the impact that head coaches have on their respective teams. Just how impactful are they, like on an X's and O's game by game basis? And I think that there's a lot of kind of fascinating things that could come out of that. But this kind of thing to me is coaching. Can Matt Painter do what Tony Bennett did and figure out how to motivate a team because of a loss like that while not letting it bury them? It is a really difficult task. And Purdue brought basically everybody back. Almost everybody who contributes to this team, with the exception of Lance Jones, was there that last year. They saw this happen to them. They felt it. They experienced it. I don't think that's a bad thing necessarily. Anytime you bring an entire roster back from a team that was a number 1 seed, you got to feel pretty good. But I do wonder, would it be better to have a more different roster, not have as many guys who experienced that? I don't know the answer to that. But I do think that Matt Painter has to find a way to do exactly what you said, which is make sure these guys know the feeling, make sure they know, they are ready to not let it happen again without going out there and worrying about it. That's the last thing they should be thinking about while they're on the floor playing whatever 16 seed they play this year. But again, you don't want to just completely pretend it didn't happen, because you have to remember, you got to use it as motivation. And I think Matt Painter is one of the best college basketball coaches in the country. Right. I don't think there's a lot of debate about that. There are some questions about his ability to win in March. And certainly this is a huge year for him to prove some of those doubters wrong. But I think his ability to get this team ready for this is top notch. And I think that they're going to be ready. But it's certainly one of the more fascinating things we're going to be watching for when we get into March.
It's interesting. You said bringing back a lot of the same guys. I mean, that was Virginia. They brought back a lot of that same nucleus. Obviously, Kihei Clark was a freshman that year and had that monster pass. But I wonder, I haven't heard and obviously haven't asked, but I wonder if Matt Painter reached out to Tony Bennett at all. I'd be really curious to know.
I bet he did.
The answer on that. Yeah, it'd be almost coaching malfeasance to not have done so. Andy, Merry Christmas to you, buddy. It's great to be together. Merry Christmas to all of you. Thanks so much for joining us. We'd love to hear what teams you would like Santa to bring a gift to. Hop in the Discord if you're not part of it already and let us know your thoughts on that. Again, if you would go vote for us on the Sports Podcast Awards, it would mean so much. Hope you have a great Christmas day with your family. Eat all the food, drink all the drinks, watch all the movies, and hopefully you bought batteries for the toys. As always, apologies to the lawyer family. Let's go Wildcats. And until tomorrow, when Andy and I will be right back with you. Peace.